sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth. And every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I'm so excited about this week, you guys. It's rare somewhat for so many cases and trials to be going on, but I am stoked. And so for this episode, I wanted just to do an episode, a few news updates, and then also kind of set the schedule for how We Saw the Devil is going to tackle those. Before we get into it, though, again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. I'm your host, Robin. If you're not, make sure you're following the show on Instagram, which is its primary source right now. You can follow that at We Saw the Devil Podcast. If you want to follow me as a human, see my dogs, what I eat, the concerts I go to, random things, you can do that at Robin_WSTD. That's ROBIN_WSTD. The new website will be up soon. I swear to you, it's been busy. And also thank you to all of the people who messaged me congratulating me on the engagement. Super appreciate it. I'm very, very excited. Other than that, though, just in terms of following the show, you can also follow on Facebook. There's a Facebook page, a Facebook group. There's Twitter, now X, YouTube as well. You can watch all the episodes on YouTube. There's no video. I haven't invested time in video yet, but if you want to just listen on YouTube instead, you can do that there. And then I'm currently working on Realms, which is a new streaming platform. And I'm going to be doing live streaming, like shows. You'll have a chat, people can come on. So I'm actually setting that platform up now as well. So a lot going on the back end. But let's talk about scheduling because, like I said, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I'm so excited. I mean, the world is literally crashing and burning around us right now. And if if my guilty pleasure and pick me up is watching Lori Vallow represent herself in her Arizona trial, so be it. I'm not going to feel bad about that. But the next episode, Jeff Martin, whom I know many of you loved, will be joining me to talk about paraphilias. And I am so excited about this episode. I did make a post on our Instagram asking you guys to tell me the weirdest thing anyone has ever requested of you during sex, during sexy time. And no one was brave enough to comment publicly. I mean, I get it, but man, my DMs are piping hot. There's just some really, really weird shit out there. So on the next episode, I'm going to share, my stories as well. But Jeff is going to be joining me to discuss the connections between paraphilias and violent crimes, serial killers, as well as just kind of talking about it in general, some of the weirdest ones. And I have to say that preparing for this episode, so we were supposed to record that earlier this week. Well, first last week, then earlier this week. And it's been a wild one. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, you know. So I have two German short hair pointers, but my male all of a sudden started having boo hole issues. Thank you, 90 Day Fiance and Asuelu. I now call the anus boo hole all the time. But yeah, he has an infected anal gland. So it's been a wild week. Imagine a cheetah on steroids. And that's basically what I've been dealing with this week with my dog. So not fun. But that being said, Jeff and I are, getting ready to record. The way this episode came to be is I've been fascinated by this as a whole, right? Because there are some really weird, creepy serial killers out there where it appears that their crimes were sexually motivated. So I was like, okay, well, there's some really weird stuff out there. So Jeff and I kind of started having a back and forth about it. And so it's basically become Jeff will message me, must lick my partner's eyeballs as I ejaculate. And then I'll respond to him, I can only get it up for amputees. And we've just been going back and forth with the weirdest paraphilias that we have found. And I'm really, really excited to talk about this because I think most of us, at least, our interest in true crime lies in the psychology of it all, right? Why do they act this way? What kind of childhood, nurture versus nature, all of those things, right? Especially when it comes to incredibly violent crimes. And there have been several notorious killers that have demonstrated how early psychological experiences and specific fixations, I'll call it, can evolve into incredibly disturbing criminal behaviors. So, Glenn Rogers, for instance, he was apparently pushed underwater by his red-headed mother during childhood. She quasi drowned him a few times. He was a serial killer, and so in adulthood, many of his victims were red-headed women whose bodies were found submerged in water. So again, potential link between early trauma and the symbolic nature of his crimes, and they were also sexually motivated. Jerry Brudos, whom I believe you guys may recall from the show Mindhunter, he developed a deep obsession with women's shoes because when he was a child, he was punished for wearing high heels. That fixation, which is called incentive salience, later extended into a fetish for women's feet, which the paraphilia is known as partialism. His women's feet fetish became central to his violent acts against his victims. Charles Albright became fixated on eyes after gaining early exposure to taxidermy, where, guess what he did? He regularly handled animal eyes. And so, as an adult, many of his crimes involved targeting victims' eyes as well. So, y'all get my drift here. It's going to be a really fascinating episode. I'm super excited to talk about it. And again, if you haven't, or if you feel comfortable, if you have experienced someone request something of you in bed that has been incredibly weird, it can stay completely anonymous. In fact, it's all going to stay completely anonymous, but I am going to read some of, user submissions for this. So, if you would like to contribute to this, again, I will keep your information completely safe and protected and anonymous. But I will just read in general what happened. So you can send that to info@wesawthedevil.com. You can email it if you would like, or you can just reply to the Instagram thread or send me a DM on Insta. I'll get it in any of those ways. Okay, so after this episode, Iris is coming back, and we're going to do weekly summaries of the Lori Vallow Arizona trial. And I don't know if any of you guys have been watching it so far. I need to catch up a little bit, but I swear on everything that is holy, if I hear the phrase, the evidence will show one more fucking time, I may self-immolate. But in any case, it's really fascinating watching. I still can't believe that she's actually representing herself. And if you thought it was a poor idea when you initially heard that she was planning to do that, you would be correct. That is what's coming up in the next week and a half or so. And beyond that, I guess let's get into this one. This is just going to be a couple updates that I want to at least, I guess, set the stage for what's going on right now. The case I think that I'm mostly interested in is actually the Karen Reed trial. And we are currently, as of today, on the 8th day of impanelment in the second Karen Reed trial. That being said, so far, 15 out of the 16 jurors have been chosen and seated. And today, this process is likely going to tie up, and opening statements may actually begin as early as next week. I'm so excited. Now, this is messy. This is so messy. And just to recap again, if you're new here, Karen Reed, the first trial ended in a mistrial after the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict. So, subsequently, Karen Reed's legal team filed a motion to dismiss certain charges. They claimed that some of the jurors had unanimously found her not guilty on specific counts, and they also raised double jeopardy concerns. Prosecutors disputed this, stated that no partial verdicts were reached. And during the first trial, Karen Reed's defense team alleged that there was a massive cover up by local and state police to protect individuals present at the scene of the crime. If you recall, Karen Reed was dating a police officer, Boston police officer. They went out to drink with some friends. They ended up going to one of the homes where there were a bunch of law enforcement. It was a husband and wife. He was a police officer. And it was just a lot of police and law enforcement in a very tight knit, well known family. He ends up the next morning dead on their front lawn and with covered in scratches and abrasions, what appears to be cuts. So in the first trial, the defense team highlighted those investigative oversights. Like there was a failure to search the house where John O'Keefe, the victim, was last seen. They used unconventional methods to collect evidence. Like this crime happened in the middle of a blizzard, and investigators got red fucking Solo cups and then just picked up some blood out of the snow and popped them in the Solo cup. When have you ever heard of that? There was a lot more too, and this is just a very light spattering of this. Defense team's entire thing is that she didn't do it. We need to focus on the house. There's a cover up here, potential cover up here. Well, the prosecution's case in the first trial relied on circumstantial evidence. There were fragments of Karen Reed's broken tail light found near the scene. That's how the prosecution claims that Karen Reed killed John O'Keefe, that she hit him with her Lexus car SUV and left him to die in the snow. So there was, in fact, a broken taillight, and there were some broken taillight pieces found near the scene. There was also a single strand of John O'Keefe's hair in her vehicle. Witnesses testified that Karen Reed admitted to hitting John O'Keefe literally the morning that he was found. He was found by Karen Reed. He didn't come home. She couldn't get in touch with him. So she and a couple friends went out driving. They went back to the house where she dropped him off, and Karen Reed immediately saw him on the ground. It was in the middle of a snowstorm. And apparently she yelled, "I hit him, I hit him." Well, the defense argued that the evidence itself that was there, that was found, was mishandled. And then they suggested that John O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent with being struck by a vehicle. They proposed that he could have been assaulted inside the home by, the well-connected other law enforcement officers and family, and then left outside. Also, there's been talk that he was potentially attacked by their dog. And then we have the entire weird thing about the family, the Alberts, who owned the home where this all happened. They sold their house and rehomed their dog within months of this crime happening. And this home had been in their family for like 50 years. And it's just so crazy. And it's just so messy. And lest we not forget, the lead investigator on this entire case, State Trooper Michael Proctor, he was found to have sent offensive text messages about Karen Reed. Like, this was the man who was the head investigator of this entire case, and he was texting other people involved, like witnesses and people involved in the case and his private friends, referring to her as a whack job. He laughed and joked about trying to find her nudes on her phone as he was going through her phone. He said that he wishes that she would just kill herself. And although Proctor apologized and claimed that, these messages did not influence the investigation, I'm just a shitbag, he was actually dishonorably discharged from the Massachusetts State Police after the trial. This is a whole lot of mess, y'all. So this week, again, we are in the empanelment phase. They've seated 15 out of 16 jurors, at least at the time of this recording, Thursday afternoon. And on Monday of this week, Karen Reed's legal team petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court. She's asking them to intervene, arguing that continuing with the trial would violate her Fifth Amendment rights. Now, her attorneys claim that multiple jurors from her first trial have stated that she was acquitted on 2 of the 3 charges, including the most serious one, which is second-degree murder. The petition reads, "The double jeopardy protections at stake in her petition are simply too important to force Reed to stand trial for a murder that she contends a prior jury of her peers already acquitted her of." According to the petition, the jury on her original trial reached a unanimous decision to acquit her on 2 counts, but that the verdict was never formally announced. The Supreme Court has yet to rule on whether those charges should be dismissed, prompting her team to seek an immediate halt to the proceedings. Currently waiting on the outcome of all of that. But again, they are seating jurors, and opening statements probably are going to begin next week. Massachusetts is not the state, is not letting this one go. They are bound and freaking determined to see her put in prison or at least get through the second trial. As I said in the last episode, I've been watching the Max documentary, A Body in the Snow, the Karen Reed trial. I highly, highly suggest you watch it to catch up, especially if you plan to deep dive on this one. I think it's like 5 episodes. I think I have 1 episode left. It's very, very, very good. It is maybe 60% thorough in terms of evidence and things like that, but it's fascinating. And the thing about it, y'all, is that the defense team's entire thing is that this is a cover up. Karen Reed didn't do this. This is a cover up. And then they are able to point to multiple instances that are a little sus, not gonna lie. And then the prosecution is like, look, there's taillight fragments on the ground. Karen Reed clearly hit him. She even admitted that she hit him initially right off the bat. It seems like it would be cut and dry. And I'm not, everyone knows that I'm super liberal, but one of my least favorite things, side tangent, something that really pisses me off about progressives, I think ACAB is so fucking stupid. You know, I cringe anytime I hear people say ACAB, which for those of you who are not aware, it stands for all cops are bad. And it's basically, the all cops are bad because, some of them are the bad apples and, the thin blue line and all of that bullshit. But I just think it's so ridiculous to say all cops are bad, even if it's just, a movement or a statement. I don't know. But all of that to say, I'm not someone who constantly thinks poorly of cops or thinks that they're, all corrupt and horrible people and blah, 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 blah. I'm not one of those people. However, I am aware and have researched and looked at so much true crime to know that it is way more common than you think, especially when you're talking about Boston, old families, well connected. Is there a tiny bit of suspension of disbelief in the Karen Reed case that you kind of have to go through to get to where the defense is? Sure. But the thing about it is that the prosecution and the investigators didn't do themselves any favors. And then when you talk about like the data from his phone and showing that he went up and down, different levels and how many steps, and it is just a mess, you guys. I could spend hours talking about this case and breaking down the evidence. Oh, I'm not even going to get into it. But I'm telling you, this is a fascinating case. So again, opening statements for this one are probably going to be in the next week, 1 to 2 weeks max, and definitely going to be covering it. But moving on to the Bryan Kohberger case. So prosecutors and defense attorneys for Bryan Kohberger, if y'all recall, he's the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022. Yesterday, they spent all their time debating key legal boundaries for the upcoming trial. And it was a 2-day hearing. And on day 1, they talked about a lot. He faces 4 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the stabbing deaths. Again, Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonsalves. They were killed in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022, at a rented off-campus house in Moscow, Idaho. At the time of the murders, if y'all recall, Kohberger was a graduate student in criminal justice at Washington State University. He was arrested in Pennsylvania a couple weeks later after investigators matched his DNA to genetic material found on a knife sheath recovered at the crime scene that was left underneath one of the victims. Kohberger has not entered a plea. A judge actually entered a not guilty plea on his behalf after he remained silent when asked. Now, there's mad preparations going on right now. I mean, intense preparations for the trial. Both sides have filed over 170 motions covering a range of topics, basically from the admissibility of DNA evidence to who can actually be present in the courtroom. The hearing allows 4th District Judge Stephen Hippler to review these motions, hear the legal rationale in person, have, the defense attorneys and prosecutors argue it out, and then ask and question those attorneys directly. So some things he can deliver rulings on the spot, or later he can issue a written decision. So here's a breakdown of some of the most significant motions discussed on Wednesday. Now, this has been discussed before, and that's the Amazon purchase history. Prosecutors want to introduce evidence suggesting Kohberger used his Amazon account to purchase a K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener, the exact same type of weapon believed to have been used in the killings. And they also want to present Kohberger's browsing history as part of their case. The defense team argued that others had access to the Amazon account and asked that the click history not be used in court. However, Judge Hippler denied the request to exclude the data, saying the defense is free to argue that Kohberger did not make the purchase, but that the evidence itself can be presented. And don't forget, y'all, the murder weapon has never been recovered. It has not been recovered. There's a sheath matching the type sold with a K-bar knife that was found at the scene, again, under one of the victim's bodies, but the weapon itself has not been located. So the prosecution is saying, well, it will attempt to say he bought this K-bar knife on Amazon. This is the murder weapon used. The defense attorneys are saying that no, and also the sheath may have been planted. Then we have eyewitness testimony. If you recall, we have the surviving roommate, Dylan, reported seeing a masked man with bushy eyebrows in the house the night of the murders. The defense team argued that this testimony could unfairly sway the jury because what is the definition of bushy eyebrows? In response, the prosecutors planned to introduce a photo that Kohberger took of himself just hours after the murders, arguing that it provides an accurate depiction of his appearance at the time. Judge Hippler did not rule on this issue during the hearing. So what do you guys think about that? Should a selfie that Bryan Kohberger took just a couple hours after the murders be admissible in court? Should it be allowed as a depiction of him and his eyes and eyebrows? Then we have the 911 call. So about 8 hours after the time of the murders, two roommates called 911 after realizing one of their housemates wasn't waking up. And the defense questioned whether the audio of this call should be played for the jury, citing concerns over hearsay. Prosecutors argued that the recording should be allowed under the quote unquote excited utterance exception, which is a rule that permits emotionally charged statements made during or shortly after a traumatic event. Now, Judge Hippler agreed that much of the 911 call meets that exception, but said he would provide more specific guidance on which portions can be used. So it sounds like the 911 calls are not going to be aired in full in the trial, which is interesting. I'm kind of excited to hear more about that when he does issue the guidance, and the ruling for that. Another thing they discussed was the death penalty and the autism diagnosis. The defense asked the judge to prevent prosecutors from using Kohberger's autism diagnosis as an aggravating factor if he is convicted and enters the penalty phase of the trial. Prosecutors said that they do not plan to cite autism as a reason for seeking the death penalty, but also don't want the defense to use the diagnosis to explain away potentially incriminating behavior. Judge Hippler issued a preliminary ruling stating that autism cannot be used by the state as an aggravating factor, and he will issue a more detailed decision later on the piece for the prosecution. And the final piece is Kohberger's family in the courtroom. So Bryan Kohberger's family has been listed by the prosecution as potential witnesses, which generally, could typically bar them from being present in the courtroom before they testify. We saw a lot of that in the Lori Vallow case. The defense objected, arguing that Kohberger has been in isolation for 2.5 years now, and that he heavily relies emotionally on his family. They also stated that his relatives have no intention of testifying. Judge Hippler said he will issue a ruling later, but encouraged prosecutors to call family members early in the trial if they do intend to use them as witnesses. Jury selection is scheduled to begin on July 30th. Opening statements are set to start on August 11th at the Ada County Courthouse in downtown Boise. And God's bless that courthouse in Boise. It has seen a lot of things over the last couple years. But this trial, y'all, is expected to last up to 3 months. It's going to be going from August 11th at least through early November. It's going to be an interesting one, and I'm really, really excited for this trial as well. All right, so separately from the big cases, something big happened yesterday, which is really fascinating, and that's Jillian Lauren Schreiner, the wife of Weezer bassist Scott Schreiner, was apparently shot by police during an altercation in the Eagle Rock neighborhood of Los Angeles. This is weird, and I'm kind of keeping an eye on this one because I want to know what really happened. So, the incident occurred after a hit and run crash on the 134 freeway in Figueroa Street. One of the suspects reportedly fled the scene on foot, entering the residential area near the 5300 block of Waldo Place, which is close to the Schreiner residence. Lauren Schreiner, 51 years old, was allegedly armed, and police say, again, this is what the police are saying, that she refused to surrender her weapon when confronted by officers. She was then shot once in the shoulder by police. According to the LAPD, Lauren Schreiner had been in pursuit of one of the crash suspects at the time of the incident. A lot of reports are saying that the suspect from the crash was in her yard. So after briefly returning to her home, she surrendered to officers and was taken into custody. So she was transported to a nearby hospital for treatment and later absentee booked for attempted murder. Attempted murder is the charge, and her bail was set at $1 million. The LAPD reported that one male suspect was cited and released, while two others remain at large. The suspected driver involved in the original hit and run was apprehended by the California Highway Patrol. And CHP spokesman Daniel Keene told the LA Times that the man was found around 4:20 p.m. in a nearby backyard wearing only boxer shorts. Local news footage showed him removing all of his clothes, getting into a pool, and then watering someone's plants before his arrest. Because that's normal behavior. My questions here immediately. A, is there any chest cam footage of what happened? And then secondly, were the officers who responded to the scene uniformed or were they plainclothed? I want to know what happened. I mean, because what we know so far is so weird. I mean, it could go multiple ways, right? It could be like she had some sort of mental issue or, meltdown or something that caused her to act erratically. Or what if she heard that there were suspects fleeing, that they were in her neighborhood, she armed herself, saw someone in her backyard and came out, and then plainclothed police officers showed up? She wouldn't have had any idea who they are. So I don't know. It's just so much is going on there. I can't wait to get the rest of the story because it's fascinating. I hate the band Weezer, cannot stand them. But, I guess it's all over Consequence of Sound, Rolling Stone, the news, and it's kind of an interesting little story. So I can't wait to get more information there. Another item this week that really gave me the chills, almost as badly as the one where the guy was hiding under the child's bed and the babysitter, went in to let him know and reassure him that there are no monsters under the bed, pulled up the bed skirt, and then saw a man under the bed. Ugh. So, authorities in Florida have arrested a tour guide in connection with the death of a woman whose body was discovered in a resort closet after other guests unknowingly spent the night in the same room as her corpse. Ugh. According to the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, 43-year-old Nadine Marie Tillman was found dead on Tuesday, April 8th, inside a room at the Amaret Dive Resort in Key Largo. Her death was the result of a violent beating. Later on that day, 33-year-old Dylan Lamb, reportedly a kayak tour guide, was arrested and charged with murder in connection to Tillman's death. Apparently, Tillman was reported missing by a family member who told authorities that they had not heard from her since this past Saturday. They said that that's highly unusual because she's very communicative. Responding officers discovered her body during a welfare check. Investigators say that Tillman and Lamb met on Saturday morning at the resort where Lamb had been staying since Friday. Her body was ultimately then found inside the room that Lamb had rented. According to the Miami Herald, hotel staff told investigators that Lamb had been asked to vacate the room to accommodate incoming guests, but he refused. After Lamb eventually checked out on Sunday, cleaning personnel found blood-stained sheets stuffed into yard waste bags. However, they did not notify police or authorities at that time. Unbeknownst to them, new guests were checked into the same room, Lamb's old room, and reportedly spent at least one night, a day and a half there, while Tillman's body remained hidden in the crawl space of the air conditioning closet in the room. Ugh. I mean, this is almost up there with the Lisa Lamb case of drinking water with her dissolving body in it. Ugh. Lamb has been charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, destruction of evidence, and procuring another for prostitution, according to the Monroe County jail records. His arraignment is scheduled for next week, and it is currently unknown as to whether he has retained legal representation. I'm sure that those guests just are very displeased to learn that they spent the entire night with a corpse in the closet, literally. All right. And then the final item that we're covering today, y'all, is the update on that nightmare in Hawaii scenario. So, if you guys recall, I did touch on this case last week, and it's the case of the Hawaii anesthesiologist who is accused of attempting to murder his wife. Well, his attorney, the attorney now representing him, is saying that there's more to the story than what's been reported. And they haven't come out and added any additional context to that. But Gerard Koenig, 46, has been charged with second-degree attempted murder following an alleged March 24th attack on his wife, 36-year-old Ariel Koenig. And they were on a birthday trip to Oahu. Now, he just entered a not guilty plea during a court appearance this past Monday. Ariel, his wife, survived the violent incident and then told police that her husband tried to push her off a cliff, then struck her in the head with a rock, beat her face, and attempted to inject her with an unknown substance. And he did this on her birthday. Like, they were in Maui celebrating Ariel's birthday at the time that this occurred. But now, before the arraignment, Koenig's attorney issued a statement emphasizing that the public has only heard one side of the case. He said, quote, "There are two sides to every story, and thus far only one side has been shared. The other side to the story will be shared with the court process at the appropriate time." Now, the husband was a very well-known anesthesiologist. Ariel, the wife, is a nuclear engineer. And she told investigators that the attack was triggered by her refusal to take a photo with her husband on the edge of the cliff. If you recall, she said she got a really bad feeling, didn't feel comfortable, didn't want to go close, and then he just attacked her and physically assaulted her. She further claimed that after the physical assault, that her husband tried to FaceTime their son while uttering completely disturbing remarks. And she also has filed a restraining order. And in this request, she alleges that the attack was part of a larger pattern of abuse. She accused her husband of sexually abusing her for several months and claimed that he had become increasingly controlling since accusing her of cheating on him in December, including restricting and monitoring her communications. And this is going to be a wild case as well. No, it's currently still under investigation and no trial date has been announced as of yet, but this too is going to be one that I will cover when it comes out. But that is it for today's just quick update, headline episode. So a lot of stuff moving, y'all. A lot of stuff moving. But I guess to recap in short, we have the Lori Vallow, Arizona trial going on now. It's actively going on now. Iris will be joining me this next week to record and give you guys kind of the up-to-date, summary of what's been going on if you don't have time to watch the trial. The next episode, I believe Jeff and I are going to record tomorrow, I believe. And we are going to talk about, again, paraphilias, serial killers, which weird paraphilias they have. And for those of you who are not aware, a paraphilia is a condition characterized by abnormal sexual desires, typically involving extreme or dangerous activities. What this basically is just intense sexual arousal to atypical things like situations, fantasies, behaviors, objects, individuals. Basically anything that's a sexual interest in anything other than a legally consenting human partner. So we're going to talk about the weirdest things that are out there that have been medically defined, talk about various serial killers and what kind of paraphilias they had and how that relates to their upbringing, as well as some statistics and psych publication studies on the topic. But that is it for today, guys. Again, thank you for listening. I don't know if you guys are excited, but I'm really freaking excited. Again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. I am your host, Robin. If you are not, make sure to follow the podcast on Instagram at We Saw the Devil Podcast. You can follow me at Robin_WSTD. Also, we are on Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter. Beyond that, I am still working on the new website. For those of you new here, I had a nice website. It has been down for a bit now. I am still working on that and getting that up and running. Also, don't forget to join the Discord if you ever want to talk. I'm currently working on getting set up on a streaming platform as well, but do have Discord, and I am going to start doing weekly or bi-weekly live chats again, where we basically all get on headsets and talk and whatnot. So lots of stuff going on, but make sure you're following for the latest news because the podcast is back full time now. That is it for today, guys. Until next crime.